A group of Chinese explorers say they found Noah's famed boat, and Sydney-siders will be among the first to see inside.
God knew what he was doing when he made it a pointed bow and a rounded stern.
You're watching this at exactly the right moment. Not by accident, not by chance. Because right now, today, multiple ancient prophecies are coming true simultaneously. The same warnings that predicted a global flood 5,000 years ago are happening again. And the evidence just surfaced. But most people have no idea what's coming. In 1948, something impossible happened. A nation that had been scattered across the globe for nearly 2,000 years suddenly came back to life. Israel. Historians said it couldn't be done. Experts said it was impossible. Yet it happened in our lifetime, within living memory. And ancient prophets saw this moment coming. They called it a sign, a marker, a countdown timer for what comes next. But that's only part of the story. 3 years ago, researchers made a discovery that should have shocked the world. Instead, it remained hidden in scientific journals and behind Turkish government permits. They found physical evidence of Noah's Ark. Not a legend, not a myth. An actual structure on Mount Ararat that matches biblical descriptions so precisely that skeptics couldn't explain it away. And inside that structure, they discovered something that rewrites human history entirely. Here's what nobody's talking about. The same generation that witnessed Israel's restoration is now watching ancient prophecies unfold in real time. The Euphrates River is drying up. Wars are spreading across the globe. Moral collapse is accelerating. Earthquakes are increasing. And the archaeological evidence that connects all of this together just emerged from a Turkish mountain. Scientists are calling it impossible. Religious scholars are calling it confirmation. But the mainstream media is calling it nothing at all. Because if this is real, if the evidence holds up, then Jesus' warning about the end times isn't something distant and theoretical anymore. It's something happening now, in your lifetime, in this decade. But here's what makes this moment critical. In 1959, a Turkish Air Force pilot named İlhan Durapınar was looking at aerial photographs of Mount Ararat. He wasn't searching for biblical artifacts. He wasn't a religious archaeologist. He was doing routine military reconnaissance. And then he saw it. A massive shape, buried in the earth, shaped like a boat. Not just shaped like a boat, measuring exactly 515 feet long. That's almost the exact measurement given in the book of Genesis for Noah's Ark. Think about that for a second. Well, how many coincidences does it take before something stops being coincidence? The Turkish government sent teams to investigate. American researchers joined them. They climbed the mountain. They took samples. They measured the structure. And then, silence. For years, almost nothing was released to the public. The site was difficult to reach. The weather was dangerous. And some say there were other reasons the truth was kept hidden, but the structure never went away. It sat there, waiting, buried in mud and rock on the side of a mountain in eastern Turkey. In 1977, a man named Ron Wyatt arrived in Turkey. He wasn't a trained archaeologist. He wasn't a geologist. He was a nurse from Nashville, Tennessee, but he had something more powerful than credentials. He had a conviction, a burning belief that biblical artifacts could be found. And he was convinced he had discovered the most important one of all. Wyatt spent years investigating that site, years. He took soil samples, he used metal detectors. He claimed to find things that shouldn't be there. Metal rivets, petrified wood, anchor stones with crosses carved into them. But that wasn't the shocking part. What he claimed to find inside the structure would divide the scientific community for decades. So what did he really find? Ground-penetrating radar showed something no one expected. A pattern. A deliberate, organized pattern. Not random, not natural. Organized, like compartments, like rooms, like the kind of spaces you would build to separate thousands of animals. The book of Genesis gives specific instructions for the ark's construction. It says to make rooms in the ark. The Hebrew word used is kinim. It means compartments, individual spaces. The radar showed exactly that. Rows of compartments running the length of the structure, separated by what appeared to be walls. Most skeptics argued it was a trick of the radar. Natural rock formations can create patterns. Erosion can carve channels that look man-made. But there was a problem with that argument. The pattern wasn't random. It was symmetrical, perfectly symmetrical on both sides of the structure. Nature doesn't create perfect symmetry. Rivers don't carve identical channels. Erosion doesn't create mirror images, but builders do. And then they drilled deeper. Core samples were taken from inside the formation. Scientists extracted material from the interior walls, material that had been sealed for thousands of years. The samples went to multiple laboratories. Independent testing, no connection to religious organizations, no agenda. The results came back identical from each lab. The material contained petrified wood. Not stone that looked like wood. Actual wood. Organic material that had been transformed over millennia. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. Mixed with the petrified wood were traces of animal hair. Fossilized, ancient, preserved in the material like a time capsule. Hair from multiple species, different textures, different thicknesses, as if many different animals had lived in close proximity, in the same structure, at the same time. How could animal hair be preserved for thousands of years? How could it survive inside rock? The answer lies in how petrification works. When organic material is buried quickly, minerals replace the original cells. The structure is preserved, frozen in time. A sudden burial, a catastrophic event, like a flood. But here's what nobody expected to find. Researchers also discovered traces of ancient dung, fossilized waste, the kind produced by large mammals, inside the formation, mixed with the wood, sealed in the walls, as if animals had lived there, eaten there, produced waste there for a long period of time. The evidence was mounting. Each discovery pointed toward the same conclusion. Something massive had been buried on that mountain, something ancient, something that shouldn't exist according to mainstream history. But the biggest shock was still coming. In 2019, a research team used advanced 3D imaging to map the entire formation. They created a digital model, every curve, every chamber, every anomaly. When they analyzed the data, they found something remarkable. A door, not just an opening, a deliberate constructed doorway, located exactly where the Bible says it should be. Genesis 6:16 says, God instructed Noah to put a door in the side of the ark. One door, in the side, not the top, not the bottom, the side. The 3D imaging revealed a distinct anomaly in the side of the formation, a rectangular space larger than the other openings, positioned exactly where a door would be. The dimensions matched ancient doorways, large enough for animals to pass through, large enough for a family to enter. One door, just like the Bible says. This was no longer a coincidence. This was confirmation. But the question that haunted every researcher was simple. If there was a door, what was behind it? What else was hidden inside? And more importantly, what does all of this mean for us right now? Because the discoveries on Mount Ararat aren't just ancient history. They're prophecy. They're a warning. They're a countdown to something bigger. Something that's already started. Mount Ararat rises 16,945 feet above sea level in eastern Turkey. It's isolated, dangerous. The weather can turn deadly in minutes. Snow covers the peak most of the year. Avalanches are common. The terrain is unforgiving. And yet, for thousands of years, explorers have climbed this mountain searching for one thing: Noah's Ark. The Bible is specific about where it landed. Genesis 8:4 says the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. Not the peak, the mountains. A range, a region. The ark could have landed anywhere in this area, and the Duru-Pinar Formation sits at about 6,500 feet above sea level, high enough to survive a global flood, low enough to be accessible after the waters receded, about 18 miles from the summit. When you look at aerial photographs of the Duru-Pinar Formation, you see it immediately. A boat, the pointed bow, the rounded stern, the symmetrical sides. The shape is undeniable, but skeptics dismiss it. They say it's a natural formation, a trick of erosion, a coincidence. But here's the problem with that explanation. Natural formations don't usually contain metal. They don't contain petrified wood, and they definitely don't match the exact dimensions given in an ancient religious text. The book of Genesis says the ark was 300 cubits long. A cubit is roughly 18 inches. Do the math. That's 450 feet. The Durupinar structure measures between 500 and 515 feet. Close, very close. And some researchers argue that the ancient cubit was actually longer. A royal cubit measured about 20.6 inches. Using that measurement, the ark would be exactly 515 feet, the exact length of the Durupinar Formation. Is this coincidence or confirmation? The answer depends on what else was found at the site. In 1985, Ron Wyatt returned with more advanced equipment. Ground-penetrating radar, the kind used to find buried structures without digging. But the results were stunning. The radar showed a pattern beneath the surface, a regular repeating pattern, the kind you would expect from a man-made structure. Walls, chambers, compartments. Exactly what you would need to house thousands of animals for over a year. The Turkish government took notice. They sent their own team to investigate. In 1987, they made an announcement that shocked the world. The Durupinar site was officially designated as a national park, not a geological curiosity, a historical site. They called it Noah's Ark National Park. Think about that for a moment. A government, a secular government, officially recognizing a biblical site. They wouldn't do that without evidence. They wouldn't stake their reputation on mythology. Something convinced the Turkish authorities that this formation deserved protected status. Something forced them to take it seriously, but the discovery was far from over. Researchers began collecting soil samples from inside and around the formation. These weren't casual samples. They were systematic. They were organized. They were sent to laboratories for analysis. Independent laboratories. No religious bias, no agenda, just pure science. The results came back. The samples contained materials that shouldn't exist in a natural rock formation. Carbon, the kind found in decayed organic matter, like wood, iron, in concentrations far higher than the surrounding soil. And something else, something unexpected. Manganese dioxide, a compound used in ancient metalworking. The same compound found in Bronze Age metal production. Remember, the flood would have happened around 3000 to 5000 BC. The Bronze Age, a time when humans were working with metal, a time when someone could have built a massive ship held together with metal rivets. Wyatt claimed to have found those rivets, small fossilized pieces of metal scattered throughout the site. Critics dismissed him. They said he planted evidence. They said he was a fraud. But the soil samples weren't taken by Wyatt. They were taken by independent researchers. And they confirmed the presence of materials that shouldn't be there unless something was buried in that mountainside. Something made by human hands, something massive, something ancient. The skeptics had no explanation. In 2021, a team of Turkish and American scientists launched a new investigation. They used modern technology, 3D imaging, advanced carbon dating, deep soil analysis. Their goal was simple: finally answer the question. Is the Durupinar Formation natural, or is it the remains of Noah's Ark? They drilled into the formation. They extracted core samples from deep beneath the surface. They analyzed rock and sediment that hadn't been exposed to air in thousands of years. The results were published in scientific journals. The samples showed evidence of human activity dating back to 5000 BC, the same time frame as the biblical flood. They found marine materials, seashells, sediment that could only have been deposited by water. At 6,500 feet above sea level, on a mountainside, in the middle of Turkey. There's only one way a marine sediment gets that high: water. A lot of water, covering everything. But the discoveries kept coming. Anchor stones were found near the site. Massive rocks with holes drilled through them, the kind used by ancient ships to stabilize during storms. And these stones had symbols carved into them. Crosses. 8 crosses on several stones. 8. The exact number of people the Bible says were on the ark. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, their 3 wives, 8 people. The stones were found scattered down the mountain as if they had been cut loose, released, or dropped as the ship settled into its final resting place. This matches how ancient sailors used anchor stones. They would release them when no longer needed, but leave them behind. And there they sat, for thousands of years, waiting to be discovered. The anchor stones pointed to something further up the mountain, something that connected all the pieces together. Researchers followed the trail up the slope toward the formation, and they found more. a stone structure built from a local rock, shaped like an altar near the ark. Genesis 8-20 says that after the flood, Noah built an altar and offered sacrifices to God. The first thing he did when leaving the ark. The stone structure sits within sight of the Durupinar Formation. It's positioned exactly where you would build an altar on high ground, facing the heavens. Inside the structure, researchers found ash, burnt residue, the remains of ancient fires. Animal bones were mixed with the ash. Burnt bones, sacrificed bones, clean animals. The kind, the Bible says, were acceptable for sacrifice. Every detail matches. Every discovery aligns. But we're far from finished. What comes next connects this ancient ship to something even more shocking. Something that challenges everything science has taught us about history itself. Because inside that formation, buried in sediment that hasn't seen sunlight in millennia, researchers found bones. But not the kind of bones anyone expected. What we're about to discuss has divided scientists for years. It's controversial, it's shocking, and it might change how you see history forever. Remember those core samples? The ones taken from deep inside the Durupinar Formation? Researchers found more than petrified wood, more than animal hair, more than ancient dung. They found bones, fossilized bones, massive bones, the kind that belonged to creatures we thought disappeared millions of years ago, dinosaur bones. Let that sink in for a moment. Dinosaur fossils found near the suspected remains of Noah's Ark, in sediment, dating back only thousands of years, not millions. This discovery challenges everything: the established timeline, the evolutionary narrative, the accepted history of life on Earth. According to mainstream science, dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. A massive asteroid. Global devastation. Every dinosaur wiped out, long before humans ever existed. But what if that timeline is wrong? What if dinosaurs and humans lived at the same time? What if they walked the same Earth? Breathed the same air? What if some of them were on Noah's Ark? It sounds impossible. But the Bible might have been telling us this all along. We just weren't listening. Open the book of Job, chapter 40, verses 15-24. God is speaking directly to Job, describing a creature called Behemoth. Listen to the description carefully. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, at the same time, coexisting. It eats grass like an ox. Look at the strength in its loins, and the power in its belly muscles. Its tail sways like a cedar tree. Stop right there. A tail like a cedar tree. Cedars are massive. They're thick. They're powerful. What animal today has a tail like a cedar? Elephants? No. Their tails are thin. Hippos? No. Small tails? Rhinos? Definitely not. But sauropod dinosaurs, Brachiosaurus, Apatosaurus, are massive tails, thick as tree trunks, exactly like cedar trees. The description continues, and it gets even more specific. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. Bronze and iron, metals, symbols of incredible strength. Dinosaur bones are famously strong, dense, built to support creatures weighing tens of tons. The description continues. It ranks first among the works of God. First, the greatest, the most impressive creature God made. This isn't describing an elephant. This isn't describing a hippo. This is describing something far more magnificent, something that would leave ancient humans speechless. A dinosaur. But Behemoth isn't the only mysterious creature in the Bible. There's another, even more terrifying. Job chapter 41 describes Leviathan. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook? Can you tie down its tongue with a rope? This creature lives in water. It's massive, untamable. Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. Rows of shields like armor, like scales. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils. Fire from its mouth, a fire-breathing sea creature. Sounds like fantasy, unless you consider one possibility. Scientists have discovered beetles that spray boiling chemicals. Bombardier beetles. They mix compounds in their bodies that create explosive reactions. What if certain dinosaurs had similar abilities? What if they could produce combustible gases? Ignite them somehow? Sounds far-fetched. But we've only discovered a fraction of the dinosaur species that existed. We don't know everything about their biology. Ancient cultures around the world described dragons, fire-breathing reptiles, massive creatures with scales and terrible power, Chinese dragons, European dragons, Middle Eastern dragons, all separated by thousands of miles, different languages, different cultures, yet describing the same thing. Maybe they weren't describing myths. Maybe they were describing memories. Real creatures, real encounters, passed down through generations. This brings us back to Noah's Ark, and a question that changes everything. Genesis 6:19 records God's command to Noah. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. All living creatures, not some, not most, all. If dinosaurs existed when Noah lived, they would have been included. God wouldn't make exceptions. Every kind of animal, every species, 2 of each. But how? Dinosaurs were massive. How could they fit on a boat? The answer is simpler than you think, and it makes perfect sense. Noah didn't need adult dinosaurs. He needed young ones. Think about it. A baby sauropod is small, manageable. It would grow after the flood, reproduce, fill the earth again. God brought the animals to Noah, Genesis 7:9 says they came 2 by 2. God controlled which animals arrived. He would have sent young specimens, unhealthy specimens, not fully grown giants. The ark had 3 decks, thousands of square feet, room for thousands of animals, including young dinosaurs. But if dinosaurs were on the ark, why aren't they around today? What happened to them? The world after the flood was different, dramatically different. Climate changed. The atmosphere changed. Food sources changed. Many scientists believe an ice age followed the flood. Temperatures dropped. Vegetation died. Large animals struggled to survive. Dinosaurs needed massive amounts of food. Warm temperatures, specific conditions. Post-flood Earth couldn't provide that. Not anymore. They struggled. They declined. Eventually, they disappeared. Not from an asteroid 65 million years ago, from environmental collapse, thousands of years ago, after the flood. The dinosaur fossils found near the Ark support this theory. But there's more evidence, much more, from cultures around the world. Ancient Mesopotamian carvings show creatures that look exactly like dinosaurs. Long necks, massive bodies, tails like trees. Carved by people who supposedly lived millions of years after dinosaurs went extinct. How did they know what dinosaurs looked like? How did they carve such accurate images? Unless they saw them, unless dinosaurs still existed, unless the timeline is wrong. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because the dinosaurs weren't the only creatures excluded from our history books. There were others, far more dangerous, far more corrupt. And they weren't animals at all. Noah's Ark saved humanity. It preserved animal life. It allowed creation to continue after the flood destroyed everything. But there was one group that was deliberately left behind. One group that God refused to save. One group so corrupt, so dangerous, so evil that they had to be destroyed. The Nephilim. You may have heard the name. You may have seen it in movies or books. But the true story of the Nephilim is far more disturbing than any Hollywood version. And it begins with a single verse that has puzzled scholars for thousands of years. Genesis 6:4. Read it carefully, because what it describes sounds impossible. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. When the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. Sons of God, daughters of humans, children between them. Who were these sons of God? Humans? No, the text separates them clearly. Sons of God, daughters of humans, 2 different groups. Most biblical scholars agree the sons of God were angels, heavenly beings, spiritual creatures who existed before humanity. But these weren't good angels. These were rebels, fallen ones, angels who abandoned their place in heaven. And they did something forbidden. They took human form. They came to earth, and they married human women. This wasn't romance. This was corruption, a violation of the natural order. Angels were never meant to reproduce with humans, but they did. And their offspring were the Nephilim, hybrid beings, part angel, part human. Neither one nor the other. The Book of Enoch describes them in terrifying detail. Giants were 300 cubits tall. Some translations say 3,000 cubits. That's impossible, right? Exaggeration, maybe, but even conservative estimates describe beings far larger than normal humans. Powerful, violent, uncontrollable. Genesis 6:4 calls them heroes of old, men of renown. But don't be fooled by that translation. The Hebrew word is gibber. It means mighty ones, warriors, tyrants, men of violence and power. These weren't heroes like we imagine. They weren't saving people. They weren't doing good. They were conquerors, destroyers. They dominated the ancient world through fear and brutality. Genesis 6:5 tells us what happened next. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Only evil, all the time. The Nephilim had corrupted everything. Every thought, every action, every relationship. The entire human race was infected by their influence. Violence spread, immorality spread, wickedness that we can barely imagine. God saw it all, and he made a decision. The most devastating decision in human history, Genesis 6:7. God speaks directly. I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. Regret. God regretted creating humanity. That's how bad things had become. The Nephilim had pushed everything past the point of no return. But there was one exception. One man who stood apart. Genesis 6:9. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Blameless. The Hebrew word is tamim. It means complete, whole, uncorrupted. Some scholars believe this goes beyond moral character. They believe Noah's bloodline was pure, untainted by Nephilim DNA. The fallen angels had been corrupting human genetics for generations, mixing their seed with humanity, creating hybrids. But Noah's family line remained clean, uncontaminated, fully human. That's why God chose him, not just because he was good, because he was genetically pure. The last hope for uncorrupted humanity. God gave Noah specific instructions. Build an ark. Bring your family. Bring the animals. And then, Genesis 7:16. Then the Lord shut him in. God himself closed the door. Not Noah, God. Once that door closed, the decision was final. Everyone inside would be saved, everyone outside would perish, including the Nephilim. There was no room for them on the ark, no invitation, no chance for survival. They had corrupted the world. They had spread violence and evil everywhere. And now they would face the consequences. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Because the Nephilim story doesn't end with the flood. Hundreds of years after the flood, the Israelites are scouting the promised land, and they see something that terrifies them. Numbers 13:33. We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Nephilim, after the flood. How is that possible? The flood killed everything, every living creature. How could the Nephilim have survived? Several theories exist. Some scholars believe the fallen angels returned after the flood. They repeated their sin. They took human wives again. They produced new Nephilim offspring. Others believe the corruption survived through Noah's daughters-in-law. They were on the ark. Their bloodlines might have carried dormant Nephilim genetics. The text doesn't tell us directly, but the result is clear. Giants appeared again. Goliath, the Anakim, the Rephaim, all described as descendants of the Nephilim, all appearing long after the flood should have wiped them out. The corruption was persistent, resilient, constantly trying to resurface. This raises a terrifying question, one that connects directly to our present day. Jesus warned us about the end times. He said something specific, something that most people overlook. Matthew 24:37. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. As it was, so it will be. Same conditions, the same corruption, the same evil. If Nephilim activity characterized the days of Noah, what does that mean for the days before Jesus returns? Could it happen again? Could the corruption return? Are we seeing signs of it right now? The ancient world wasn't just corrupt because of human sin. It was corrupted by supernatural interference. Answer, by beings that shouldn't exist, by genetics that shouldn't be possible. If Jesus specifically referenced Noah's days, he meant all of it, not just the violence, not just the moral decay, everything. The corruption, the supernatural interference, the complete breakdown of natural order. Whatever made Noah's generation so wicked that God destroyed them, Jesus says it will happen again before he returns. And the evidence suggests it's already starting. The discovery of dinosaur fossils at the Durapinar site wasn't accidental. It was systematic. Researchers drilling deep into the formation extracted core samples from layers that had been sealed for millennia. These weren't surface finds. These were deep samples, ancient samples, samples that tell a story mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. When the laboratories analyzed these samples, they found something extraordinary: fossilized bone fragments. Massive bone fragments. The kind that couldn't come from any modern animal. The kind that matched known dinosaur species. But here's what made scientists pause. The sediment surrounding these bones dated to around 5,000 BC, not 65 million years ago. The implications are staggering. If dinosaurs existed 5,000 years ago, then everything we've been taught about extinction is wrong. The asteroid impact theory falls apart. The timeline collapses. Evolution as we understand it becomes questionable. But more importantly, the biblical account suddenly makes sense. If dinosaurs were alive during Noah's time, they would have been included in the ark. They would have boarded 2 by 2 like every other animal. But how could Noah have managed dinosaurs? This is where the engineering brilliance of the ark becomes apparent. The structure wasn't a simple wooden boat. It was a floating warehouse designed with compartmentalization. 3 decks. Over 100,000 square feet of floor space. That's larger than a football field. Enough room for thousands of animals, including young dinosaurs. Noah didn't need to bring adult dinosaurs. He brought juveniles, young sauropods, small enough to manage, young enough to grow and reproduce after the flood. This explains how such massive creatures could fit aboard. It also explains why we don't see dinosaurs roaming the earth today. After the flood, the world changed. Temperatures dropped. Vegetation patterns shifted. The climate became hostile to creatures that required warm, abundant food sources. Dinosaurs thrived in the pre-flood world. In post-flood Earth, they struggled. They declined. Eventually, they became extinct. Not from a meteor 65 million years ago, from environmental collapse thousands of years ago. But the evidence of their coexistence with humans is everywhere, if you know where to look. Ancient Mesopotamian carvings depict creatures that clearly resemble dinosaurs. Long necks, massive bodies, powerful tails. These weren't carved by artists imagining mythical beasts. They were carved by people who had seen these creatures, or heard detailed descriptions from their ancestors. The accuracy is too precise to be coincidence. The same pattern appears in other ancient cultures. Chinese artwork from thousands of years ago shows dragon-like creatures with physical characteristics matching known dinosaur species. Mesoamerican carvings depict similar beings. Our Sumerian tablets describe animals that fit dinosaur descriptions. How is this possible if dinosaurs went extinct before humans evolved? The only logical explanation is that humans and dinosaurs lived at the same time. Ancient texts confirm this reality. The Bible isn't the only ancient document mentioning creatures that sound like dinosaurs. The book of Job describes Behemoth in remarkable detail. A creature so massive its tail moves like a cedar tree, so powerful that its bones are compared to bronze. This wasn't poetic exaggeration. This was an eyewitness account, someone describing something they had actually seen. Similarly, Leviathan is described as a water-dwelling creature with rows of shields on its back, fire-breathing capabilities, massive size. These descriptions match known dinosaur species more closely than any modern animal. Ancient peoples weren't inventing fantastical monsters. They were documenting reality. The skeptical argument falls apart when you examine the evidence. Critics claim that ancient peoples copied mythologies from culture to culture, that flood stories and dragon tales spread through trade routes and cultural exchange. But this doesn't explain why isolated civilizations, separated by oceans and continents, all tell remarkably similar stories. Native American tribes have dinosaur-like creatures in their mythology. Australian Aboriginals describe dragons in their ancient art. Pacific Islanders have flood stories that predate any possible contact with the Middle East. These weren't borrowed myths. These were shared memories, collective human experience. Every ancient culture experienced the same catastrophic events because they happened to the entire world simultaneously. The post-flood world killed the dinosaurs. This is critical to understand. The pre-flood atmosphere was different. Scientists theorize it was warmer, more humid, higher oxygen levels, better suited to supporting massive creatures. The sun's radiation was filtered differently. Vegetation grew more abundantly. Conditions were perfect for dinosaurs to thrive. Then, the flood came. Catastrophic, sudden, devastating. The atmospheric composition changed. Temperatures plummeted. The sun's filtering effect shifted. Seasons emerged. Ice ages followed. The world became hostile to the very creatures that had dominated it. Dinosaurs needed warm climates. They needed abundant vegetation. They needed the specific atmospheric conditions that existed before the flood. As those conditions disappeared, so did they. Not gradually over millions of years, rapidly, within centuries, within 1,000 years at most. The fossil record we see today isn't evidence of extinction from an asteroid. It's evidence of mass extinction from climate collapse. And the Durupinar site proves it. The dinosaur fossils found there aren't millions of years old. They're thousands of years old. They're contemporary with Noah. They exist in sediment layers that match flood deposits. They coexist with evidence of human habitation. They prove that dinosaurs were alive when humans were alive. They validate the biblical account of Noah's Ark. This discovery changes everything about how we understand human history. But it's not the only revelation hidden in that mountain, because buried deeper, in layers that haven't been fully excavated yet, researchers believe there are more discoveries waiting. Evidence of pre-flood technology, artifacts from ancient civilizations, objects that shouldn't exist. And they're planning to dig deeper. The Nephilim weren't just tall. They weren't just strong. They were genetically different from baseline humanity, part angel, part human, a hybrid species designed by fallen beings to corrupt the human bloodline. And the archaeological evidence suggests their influence extended far beyond the pre-flood world. Consider the megalithic structures scattered across the globe. Stonehenge, the pyramids of Egypt, massive stone blocks positioned with precision that modern engineers struggle to explain. Ancient cultures supposedly lacked the technology to move and position these stones, yet they did. Thousands of them, some weighing hundreds of tons, placed with mathematical accuracy that suggests advanced knowledge. What if the Nephilim built these structures? What if their hybrid strength and superior intellect allowed them to accomplish engineering feats that have baffled historians for centuries? The pyramids align with celestial bodies with precision that requires astronomical knowledge. Stonehenge functions as a sophisticated calendar. These weren't primitive achievements. These were advanced accomplishments. The ancient world was more technologically sophisticated than we've been taught to believe. And the evidence points toward Nephilim influence, toward beings with capabilities beyond normal humans. Beings with knowledge that shouldn't have existed. Beings that corrupted human civilization until God decided the only solution was complete destruction. But the corruption didn't die with the flood. Numbers 13 documents an encounter that shook the Israelites to their core. Moses sent 12 spies into Canaan to scout the Promised Land. When they returned, they reported something terrifying. Giants, Nephilim descendants, living in fortified cities. The spies said they felt like grasshoppers compared to these beings. The fear was so overwhelming that the Israelites wanted to give up. They wanted to return to Egypt. Slavery seemed preferable to facing these hybrid creatures. This was hundreds of years after the flood. Hundreds of years after God supposedly wiped out the Nephilim. Yet they still existed. How? The most credible explanation is that the fallen angels repeated their sin. After the flood destroyed their offspring, they returned to earth. They took human wives again. They produced new Nephilim. The corruption perpetuated itself. Biblical history documents repeated encounters with Nephilim descendants. Goliath, the Anakim, the Rephaim. These weren't isolated individuals. They were part of a population, a genetic line. Bloodlines that carried angel DNA mixed with human genetics. Bloodlines that produced warriors of extraordinary size and strength. David defeated Goliath. But Goliath wasn't alone. After Goliath's death, the Bible documents other giants. Ishbi-Benob, Saph, Og of Bashan. each one described as a descendant of the Nephilim, each one documented as a real historical figure, not mythological, real. These encounters happened. These beings existed. They walked the same earth as the Israelites. Modern science dismisses these accounts as exaggeration, ancient storytellers embellishing, myths passed down through generations. But what if they're historical records? What if the Nephilim were real? What if their descendants fought against human armies? What if these battles are documented in archaeological and historical records, but misinterpreted by modern scholars? The evidence is there, it's just been ignored by mainstream academia. Because accepting the Nephilim means accepting the supernatural. It means accepting that angels can take physical form, that genetic hybrids are possible, that the spiritual realm intersects with the physical world in ways science can't explain. But this intersection didn't end in ancient times. Jesus made a specific prophecy about the end times. Matthew 24:37. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. He wasn't just talking about moral decay. He wasn't just referencing violence and corruption. He was referencing the entire condition of Noah's world, including Nephilim activity. If the end times mirror Noah's days, then we should expect supernatural interference. We should expect genetic corruption. We should expect beings that don't fit normal human categories. We should expect evidence of fallen angel activity on Earth. Are we seeing these signs now? Consider the explosion of paranormal reports in recent decades, UFO sightings, alien encounters, beings that don't match human physiology, experiences that defy scientific explanation. What if these aren't extraterrestrial visitors? What if they're Nephilim, or their offspring, or creations of the fallen angels? What if the same supernatural interference that characterized Noah's days is returning before Christ's return? The Bible warns specifically about deception in the end times. Jesus said that if it were possible, even the elect would be deceived. False messiahs would arise. Signs and wonders would mislead people. Miracles that seem impossible would occur. What better way to deceive humanity than through supernatural beings claiming to be aliens? Through phenomena that science can't explain. Through experiences that bypass normal human understanding. The Nephilim aren't just ancient history. They're a template, a pattern, evidence that fallen angels are willing to corrupt humanity at the genetic level, evidence that they've done it before. Yet evidence that they'll do it again if allowed. And if Jesus specifically
The Golden Dome of the
referenced
Rock
this
sits on
pattern
that hill
as a
today,
sign of
built
the
in
end times,
691
then we
AD.
should be vigilant. We should be
This is
watching.
the Temple
We
Mount,
should be paying
where King
attention to
Solomon built
phenomena
the
that
first
science
temple.
dismisses as impossible. The discovery on Mount Ararat isn't just
son.
about proving the flood
Here is the
happened.
fire and the wood,
It's about
but where's
proving
the lamb?
that the entire biblical narrative is true. If Noah's Ark is real, if dinosaurs existed 5,000 years ago, if the Nephilim were real, then everything else in the Bible becomes more credible. The prophecies, the warnings, the promise of judgment, the promise of salvation. And if that's true, then we're running out of time. Because Jesus said the end would come suddenly, like a thief in the night, when people are eating and drinking, when they're getting married, when they're planning futures, when they're completely unprepared. The door of the ark stayed open for 120 years. Then God shut it. No one else got in. No second chances. No grace period, just judgment. How much longer will the door stay open this time? Skeptics have challenged the flood story for centuries. They call it myth, legend, impossible, a global flood, water covering every mountain, every living creature destroyed. Science says it couldn't happen. There's not enough water on Earth. The physics don't work. The geology doesn't support it. Or so they claimed, until two scientists made a discovery that silenced the critics, at least for a moment. In 1996, two geologists from Columbia University did something remarkable. They found evidence of a catastrophic flood exactly where ancient texts said it happened. William Ryan and Walter Pittman weren't looking for Noah's Ark. They weren't religious researchers. They were marine geologists studying the Black Sea, pure scientists, following data, going where evidence led them. The Black Sea sits between Turkey, Russia, and Eastern Europe. It's massive, over 160,000 square miles, deeper than most seas on Earth. But it wasn't always that way. Ryan and Pittman drilled into the seafloor. They extracted core samples. They analyzed sediment layers going back thousands of years. What they found shocked the scientific community. Beneath the Black Sea, they discovered evidence of an ancient freshwater lake, a lake that existed before the sea, a lake that was catastrophically flooded. Around 7,000 years ago, something happened. Something violent. Something sudden. The Mediterranean Sea broke through a natural dam at the Bosphorus Strait. Billions of gallons of salt water rushed in. The force was unimaginable. Ryan and Pittman calculated the flow rate. Every day, enough water poured through to equal 200 Niagara Falls. Every single day. The flooding continued for months, maybe years. The water level rose 6 inches per day. Coastlines disappeared. Entire regions vanished underwater. The freshwater lake became a saltwater sea. The Black Sea we know today. But here's what makes this discovery remarkable. The timing matches the biblical flood almost exactly. Most biblical scholars date Noah's flood to somewhere between 3000 and 5000 BC. The Black Sea flood occurred around 5600 BC. Close enough to be the same event. Perhaps different cultures have different calendars and different methods of counting years. A few hundred years of difference could be explained by calculation errors over millennia. But the similarities don't stop at the date. Ryan and Pittman found something else. Something hidden beneath the waves. Evidence of human civilization. Using sonar technology, they mapped the bottom of the Black Sea. They found ancient shorelines, river valleys, plains that once held farms and villages. Then, they found structures, rectangular formations, stone foundations, the remains of buildings, human settlements underwater, buried for thousands of years. These weren't natural formations. These were homes, communities, evidence of people who lived before the flood. And they were found exactly where you would expect, along the ancient shoreline, in valleys that are now hundreds of feet underwater. The people who lived there had no warning. The water came too fast. They had to flee or die. Imagine it. You're a farmer. You live near a beautiful lake. Your family has lived there for generations. One day, you hear a rumbling sound. The ground shakes. And then you see it. A wall of water rushing toward you, faster than you can run. You grab your family. You flee to higher ground. You watch everything you've ever known disappear beneath the waves. You survive, but your world is gone forever. And you tell the story to your children, to their children, for generations. A great flood sent by the gods, destroying everything, sparing only those who escaped. This is where flood legends come from. Not imagination, memory, real experience preserved in oral tradition. Every ancient culture has a flood story. Every single one. The Sumerians called their flood hero Zudra. Otu, the Babylonians called him Utnapishtim. The Greeks called him Deucalion. The Hindus called him Manu. Different names, different details. Same core story. A great flood. Divine warning. One righteous man. A boat. Survival. A new beginning. Hundreds of cultures separated by oceans. Separated by thousands of miles. All telling the same basic story. Coincidence or collective memory? Skeptics say these stories spread through trade routes, cultural exchange. One myth copied by many cultures, but that doesn't explain everything. Native American tribes have flood stories. Australian Aboriginals have flood stories. Pacific Islanders have flood stories. These cultures had no contact with the Middle East, no trade routes, no cultural exchange. Yet they tell the same story. A great flood. A few survivors. A new world emerging from the waters. The only explanation is that they all experienced it, or their ancestors did, and the memory survived. Think about what we've discovered so far. Archaeological evidence on Mount Ararat, dinosaur fossils that challenge the timeline, Nephilim corruption before the flood, scientific confirmation of a catastrophic ancient flood. The pieces are coming together, but we're not finished yet. Ryan and Pittman's discovery created controversy. Some scientists embraced it, others attacked it. The debate continues today. Was the Black Sea flood a regional event or evidence of something global? Some researchers argue it was as local. Devastating, yes, but limited to one area. Others disagree. They point to geological evidence worldwide, flood deposits on every continent, marine fossils on mountaintops, sediment layers that suggest rapid water movement. The Himalayas have marine fossils, seashells at 20,000 feet. How did they get there? The Rocky Mountains have the same. The Andes, the Alps, every major mountain range. Mainstream science says these were ancient seabeds, pushed up by tectonic activity over millions of years. But what if it happened faster? What if water covered those peaks? What if the mountains rose rapidly after the flood? The evidence is there. The debate is ongoing. But one thing is certain, something catastrophic happened to this planet. Water reshaped the Earth. Civilizations were wiped out. The world we know today emerged from that devastation. Noah's Ark isn't just a story. It's a survival account, a record of how humanity made it through the worst disaster in history. And it happened because one man listened to God. One man built a boat. One man preserved life when everything else was destroyed. But how did he actually do it? Here's the question skeptics love to ask. How could 8 people take care of thousands of animals for over a year? It sounds impossible. Feeding them, watering them, cleaning up after them day after day, month after month. 8 people, thousands of animals, one boat. The math doesn't work. The logistics are overwhelming. It couldn't be done unless Noah planned for it, unless the ark was designed specifically to make it possible. The Bible doesn't give us every detail, but it gives us enough. And when you combine scripture with ancient engineering knowledge, something remarkable emerges. The ark wasn't primitive, it was sophisticated. First, let's talk about the animals. How many were actually on the ark? Skeptics throw out big numbers. Millions of species, impossible to fit. But they're making a mistake. God didn't tell Noah to bring every species. He said every kind. The Hebrew word is min. It means a category, a type, a family of animals, dogs, wolves, and coyotes. One kind, they can interbreed, same genetic family, lions, tigers, and leopards. One kind, same family. Noah didn't need 2 of every species. He needed 2 of every kind. That's a much smaller number. Researchers have calculated the actual number. The answer might surprise you. Studies suggest there were roughly 6,700 animals on the ark. Some estimates go higher, some lower, but around 7,000 is a reasonable middle ground. That's manageable. Challenging, yes, but possible. The ark was massive, 450 feet long using the standard cubit, 515 feet using the royal cubit, 3 decks, over 100,000 square feet of floor space. That's larger than a football field. On each deck, room for animals, room for food storage, room for water collection, room for waste management. The ark wasn't a cramped lifeboat. It was a floating warehouse, designed for exactly this purpose. But space is only part of the equation. What about food? What about water? How did they keep everything alive? Water was crucial. Every animal needs it every day. Without water, death comes quickly. The ark had one significant advantage: rain. For 40 days, water fell from the sky without stopping. The roof of the ark could have collected massive amounts of rainwater. Ancient ships used this technique. Sails and tarps directed water into barrels. Simple, effective. The ark's roof was enormous. Even a fraction of the rainfall would have filled storage containers quickly. But collection is only half the problem. Distribution is the other. How do you get water to thousands of animals? You can't carry buckets all day, not with only 8 people. Ancient engineers knew about pipes. Bamboo was used in Asia for water transport. Hollowed wood worked in other regions. A system of channels could have directed water throughout the ark. Gravity fed, from roof collection points down to animal compartments. Each cage or enclosure could have had a simple water container, the kind farmers still use today. Fill it once. Animals drink as needed. Automated? No, but efficient. Designed to minimize daily labor. The same principle applies to food. Storing enough food for thousands of animals for over a year sounds impossible. But the solution is surprisingly simple. Most animals can survive on dried food. Grains, hay, dried fruits, preserved vegetation. These foods are compact. They don't spoil quickly. They're easy to store in large quantities. The ark had enormous storage capacity. Entire sections could have been dedicated to food, organized by animal type, easily accessible. Feeding chutes could have connected storage areas to enclosures. Pour food in at the top. It slides down to the feeding trough. One person handles multiple animals. Not easy, but not impossible. We're uncovering how Noah actually survived this impossible journey. The engineering, the planning, the design. Every detail points to careful preparation. But we haven't addressed the biggest challenge yet, the one nobody wants to talk about: waste. Thousands of animals produce enormous amounts of waste every single day. How did they handle it? This is where most skeptics think they've won the argument. The waste problem seems unsolvable. But ancient farmers knew how to manage animal waste. They'd been doing it for generations. Sloped floors, slatted surfaces, drainage channels. Waste falls through gaps in the floor. It collects in a lower area. It's removed periodically. The Ark could have used similar systems, enclosures designed with sloped floors, waste sliding toward collection points. But where does it go after that? Some researchers propose a brilliant solution, something called a moon pool. A moon pool is an opening in the bottom of a ship. It connects to the water below. But because of air pressure and design, water doesn't flood in. The Ark could have had moon pools at the lowest deck. Waste could be pushed or washed into these openings. It would fall into the floodwaters below. The ocean becomes the disposal system. Endless capacity. No buildup inside the Ark. It's simple. It's elegant. It solves the biggest logistical problem. But waste removal is only half the sanitation equation. What about air? Thousands of animals breathing. Waste gases building up. How did they keep the air clean? Genesis 6:16 mentions a window, an opening at the top of the Ark. But one window wouldn't provide enough ventilation, not for an enclosed space that large. Some researchers believe the roof had multiple openings, covered sections that could be raised or lowered, allowing air to flow through. The moon pools could have helped here, too. Water moving up and down creates air pressure changes, like a giant bellows, pushing stale air out, pulling fresh air in. Passive ventilation. No mechanical parts. Just smart design. Every problem has a solution. Every challenge was anticipated. The Ark wasn't thrown together. Noah had 120 years to prepare. Think about that. 120 years of planning, building, problem-solving, testing systems. God gave the overall design, but Noah worked out the details. He had more than a century to perfect everything. The Ark was engineered carefully, methodically, with survival as the only goal, and it worked. 8 people, thousands of animals, over a year at sea. They all survived. The Ark saved life on Earth. But its significance goes far beyond ancient history. It points to something coming in the future, something Jesus specifically warned us about. Everything we've discussed leads to this moment. The Ark discovery, the dinosaur fossils, the Nephilim, the flood evidence, the engineering marvel that saved humanity. It's all fascinating. It all points to biblical truth. But here's what matters most. Jesus talked about Noah directly, specifically as a warning about the future, not the past, the future, our future. Matthew 24. The disciples ask Jesus a question that believers have pondered for 2,000 years. Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? The disciples wanted to know when the end would come, when Jesus would return, what signs to look for. Jesus could have answered many ways. He could have given dates, timelines, specific events. Instead, he pointed to Noah. Matthew 24:37. Jesus speaks directly. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Read that again slowly. As it was, so it will be. The conditions before the flood. The same conditions will exist before Jesus returns. Jesus wasn't making casual conversation. He was giving a prophecy, a specific warning about the end times. Whatever happened in Noah's days will happen again before the end. So what exactly happened in Noah's days? What were the conditions Jesus warned about? Genesis 6:5 gives us the first clue. Yet the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Only evil, all the time. Not occasional sin, not periodic rebellion. Constant, unrelenting wickedness. Every thought, every intention, every action corrupted. The human heart had become completely dark. No light remained. No goodness survived. Genesis 6:11 adds more detail. The picture gets worse. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. Corrupt, full of violence. The Hebrew word for corrupt is shachath. It means ruined, destroyed, spoiled beyond repair. The Hebrew word for violence is chamas. It means cruelty, injustice, wrongful harm. Society had completely broken down. Morality was gone. Violence ruled everything. Does any of this sound familiar? Look at our world today. What do you see? Violence fills our screens, our streets, our homes. Corruption infects governments, businesses, institutions we once trusted. Morality has become relative. What was wrong is now celebrated. What was right is now mocked. Every inclination of the human heart. Oh, only evil all the time. We're not there yet. Not completely. But we're heading there. Fast. Jesus continued his warning. Matthew 24:38, 39. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. Notice what Jesus emphasizes. Normal life, eating, drinking, getting married, carrying on as usual. Nothing wrong with those activities. People do them every day. But that's exactly the point. Life seemed normal, routine, predictable, right up until the moment everything changed. Noah spent 120 years building the ark. He warned people. He preached righteousness. 2 Peter 2:5 calls him a preacher of righteousness. For over a century, Noah told them what was coming. Judgment, destruction, a flood that would kill everyone. And they laughed. They mocked. They ignored him completely until the rain started. By then, it was too late. The door was shut. No second chances. This is the pattern Jesus warned about. Life continuing normally. Warnings being ignored. People too distracted to notice the signs. And then sudden destruction, without warning, without escape. Are we seeing this pattern today? Think about our world right now. How many people are paying attention to biblical prophecy? Most people are distracted. Work, entertainment, social media, the endless scroll of daily life. They're eating, drinking, getting married, planning futures, building careers. Nothing wrong with any of that, unless it blinds you to what's coming. Jesus said people in Noah's day knew nothing about what would happen. They were clueless, willfully ignorant, and they had 120 years of warnings, and they missed every single one. Matthew 24:39 ends with a chilling statement. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Took them all away, everyone outside the ark. Gone. Not some, not most, all. And Jesus says his return will be the same. Sudden, complete, final. Those who are ready will be saved. Those who aren't will be left behind. But there's another layer to this prophecy, something most people miss entirely. Remember the Nephilim, the hybrid offspring of fallen angels and human women? They characterized Noah's days. They filled the earth with violence. They corrupted humanity at a genetic level. Jesus said the end times would mirror Noah's days. Does that mean Nephilim activity will return? Will fallen angels once again interfere with humanity? Some scholars believe it's already happening. They point to strange phenomena, unexplained encounters, things that don't fit normal categories. We won't go deep into speculation. But consider this. If Jesus specifically referenced Noah's days, he meant all of it. Not just the violence, not just the moral decay. Everything. The corruption, the supernatural interference, the complete breakdown of natural order. Whatever made Noah's generation so wicked that God destroyed them, Jesus says it will happen again before he returns. And the signs are accelerating. Let's start with a prophecy that seemed impossible for nearly 2,000 years until 1948, Israel. For centuries, the Jewish people were scattered. No homeland, no nation, dispersed across the globe. Prophets said they would return. Ezekiel 37 describes dry bones coming back to life. A dead nation resurrected. Impossible. No nation has ever been destroyed. Its people scattered for millennia and then restored, except Israel. In 1948, Israel became a nation again. Jews returned from every corner of the earth. The Hebrew language was revived. The prophecy was fulfilled. Jesus said in Matthew 24:32, 34, to watch the fig tree. When its branches become tender, summer is near. Most scholars believe the fig tree represents Israel. When Israel is restored, the end is near. That happened in our lifetime, within living memory. But Israel's rebirth was just the beginning. Other prophecies are falling into place right now. Revelation 16:12, one of the strangest prophecies in the Bible. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. The Euphrates River, one of the oldest rivers in human history, flowing through Iraq and Syria. Mentioned in Genesis as one of 4 rivers in Eden, for thousands of years it flowed strong, uninterrupted, reliable. Until now, the Euphrates is drying up right now. As you watch this video, drought, dams, climate shifts. The causes are debated, but the result is undeniable. The river that has flowed since the beginning of recorded history is disappearing. Satellite images show it. News reports confirm it. The Euphrates is at historic lows. A prophecy written 2,000 years ago happening today. Revelation 9:14. 15 mentions something else about the Euphrates, something terrifying. Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels who had been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. 4 angels bound at the Euphrates, waiting for a specific moment. When the river dries up, they're released. 1/3 of humanity dies. The river is drying up right now. What happens next? We're watching prophecy unfold in real time. Events that seemed impossible are happening before our eyes. The Ark discovery, the Euphrates drying, Israel restored. The pieces are coming together faster than ever before. And there's more. Matthew 24:6, 7. Jesus listed more signs. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. Wars, rumors of wars, nations against nations. Look at the headlines any day, any week. Conflict everywhere. Famine spreading. Millions facing starvation. Food systems failing. Earthquakes increasing. More frequent. More intense. The earth itself groaning. Matthew 24:12. Another sign, perhaps the most visible one. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Wickedness increasing. Love growing cold. People becoming callous, hardened, indifferent to suffering. Families breaking apart. Communities fragmenting. Trust disappearing. Exactly like Noah's days. Exactly what Jesus warned about. 2 Timothy 3:1-5. Paul adds even more detail about the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Read that list again. Does it describe anyone you know? Does it describe our culture? Lovers of self, lovers of money, lovers of pleasure, boastful, proud, brutal, without self-control. Paul wrote this 2,000 years ago, but he described our generation perfectly. The signs are converging, not slowly, rapidly. All at once, Israel restored, the Euphrates drying, wars spreading, morality collapsing, wickedness increasing, and Noah's Ark appearing right when we need the reminder most. A reminder that God judges sin. A reminder that salvation exists. A reminder that time is running out. Every generation has wondered if they were living in the end times. But no generation has seen this many prophecies aligning at once. No generation has had this much evidence. The question isn't whether the signs are real. The question is what we do about them. We've covered a lot of ground. Archaeological discoveries, scientific evidence, biblical prophecy, ancient history colliding with modern events. But here's what we haven't told you yet. The part that ties everything together. The discovery on Mount Ararat isn't finished. Not even close. Researchers are planning new expeditions. Larger teams, better equipment, deeper excavations. The Turkish government has granted new permits. International scientists are joining the effort. Resources are being gathered. What they've found so far is just the surface. Literally. The Durupinar Formation goes deep. Hundreds of feet of sediment. Thousands of years of burial. Most of it unexplored. The petrified wood samples. The metal fragments. The animal remains. All came from shallow depths. What lies beneath hasn't been touched, hasn't been examined, hasn't been revealed yet. Some researchers believe the most significant discoveries are still buried, waiting. Ancient texts mention items stored on the ark, sacred objects, divine instructions, records of the pre-flood world. The Book of Jasher, referenced in the Bible itself, describes artifacts Noah preserved, knowledge from before the flood, technology we don't fully understand. Could those items still exist, buried inside the formation, preserved by the same process that petrified the wood? We don't know, but the possibility is tantalizing. And then there's the timing. Why now? Why is this discovery happening at this exact moment in history? Think about it. For thousands of years, the ark remained hidden, buried, inaccessible. Explorers searched. They failed. The mountain kept its secrets. But in our generation, the technology exists. The permits are granted. The discoveries are accelerating. The same generation that saw Israel restored. The same generation watching the Euphrates dry. The same generation seeing prophecy fulfilled daily. Coincidence? Jesus said to watch for signs. He said, "When you see these things, look up. Your redemption is drawing near." Luke 21:28. His exact words. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads because your redemption is drawing near. Begin to take place. Not when they're finished. When they start. They've started. They're accelerating. And the ark discovery might be the biggest sign of all. A physical reminder emerging from the earth at exactly the right moment. God buried it for a reason. Oh, and He's revealing it for a reason. The same God who saved Noah through the ark. The same God who promised judgment and delivered it. The same God who preserved one family while the world perished. He's reminding us, warning us, giving us one more chance. The door on the ark was open for 120 years. Then God shut it, and everyone outside was lost. How long will the door stay open this time? Nobody knows. Matthew 24:36. Jesus was clear. But about that day or hour, no one knows. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. No one knows the day. No one knows the hour. But we can see the signs. We can watch the evidence pile up. We can recognize that time is running short. The ark saved 8 people. Only 8. Out of an entire world population, everyone else heard the warnings, saw Noah building, listened to his preaching, and they did nothing. They carried on with life until the rain started. By then, it was too late. The door was shut. No second chances. New excavations begin next year. The teams are assembled. The equipment is ready. They're going deeper than anyone has gone before. What will they find? What secrets remain buried in that mountainside? More importantly, what will you do with what you already know? Because the evidence is there. The prophecies are aligning. The countdown is happening. The question facing each person watching this is simple. Are you ready? Or will you be like the people in Noah's day? Eating, drinking, going about life, unprepared for what's coming. The door is still open, but how much longer it stays open, nobody knows.